My name is Olivia Miller and I am 26 years old and I was walking along the gravel shoulder of Route 9 with my 2-year-old son pressed tightly against my chest. Semi-trucks roared past us so close that the ground shook beneath my feet and every blast of wind made me stumble. My heart was pounding in terror but I kept walking because stopping felt more dangerous than moving forward. Suddenly tires screeched loudly behind me and before I could even turn around my father's black truck slammed into park directly in front of us. He jumped out with his face pale with rage and panic as he scanned the empty road behind me. "Olivia, where is your vehicle?" he shouted over the traffic. I looked him straight in the eyes and finally told the truth. "Anthony took my keys. He said I was medically unfit to drive." The silence inside my father's truck was heavy and thick and felt unreal compared to the roar of the highway we had just escaped. The air conditioning blasted cold air against my face, drying the sweat on my skin but doing nothing to calm the tight knot in my stomach. Noah fell asleep almost immediately in his car seat, soothed by the vibration of the engine and the steady rhythm of the road. I stared at his peaceful face and felt my hands begin to shake as the adrenaline drained away and left only exhaustion and shame. "How long?" my father asked without looking at me. His eyes stayed fixed on the road and his hands gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. He was not asking as a dad. He was asking as a police chief questioning a witness. 6 months, I whispered. Since Noah turned 18 months old. He took a sharp breath and asked why I did not tell him. I told him because it did not look like abuse. I told him that was the trick because it did not start with a lock on the door or a raised fist. It started with kindness. It started with casseroles and helpful smiles and people offering to lighten my load when I was already exhausted and overwhelmed. It started with Susan showing up with dinner and saying that I looked exhausted and that she would take the night shift with the baby. I was exhausted, so I let her. Then it was Anthony saying I should not stress about bills because he was an accountant and would handle the finances so I could focus on Noah. I was stressed, so I thanked him. I stared out the window at the trees blurring past and tried to explain the mechanics of the trap to my father. I told him about the boiling frog story where if you drop a frog into boiling water it jumps out, but if you place it in cool water and slowly turn up the heat it does not realize it is dying until it is too late. That was my life. The heat rose 1 degree at a time. First Susan moved into the guest house to help. Then she was in my kitchen every morning criticizing what I fed Noah and questioning the nutritional value of everything I cooked. Then she started checking my grocery receipts and circling items she thought were wasteful or unnecessary. When I complained, Anthony told me I was being ungrateful and dramatic. He told me I had postpartum anxiety. My father's jaw tightened and he asked if a doctor said that. I told him no and that Anthony said it every time I questioned why he moved our savings into accounts I could not access. Every time I asked why Susan had a key to our bedroom he said I was being difficult. They made me feel like my brain was broken and that I could not trust my own thoughts. Last week I tried to drive Noah to the park and my keys were gone. Anthony told me he took them for my own safety because I had been scattered lately. He said he was protecting me. I looked down at my hands and saw how raw they were from gripping the carrier straps while walking miles with my child. I told my father they checked my phone. Every night Anthony said he was just making sure I was not doom scrolling because it was bad for my mental health, but he was reading my messages and tracking my location. I stopped calling my dad because I did not want to worry him and I did not want them to know I was breaking. I believed if I behaved better and stayed calm and did everything right they would give me my life back. My father pulled the truck onto the shoulder and put it in park. He turned toward me and the look in his eyes was not anger at me. It was the cold, lethal focus of a man who had hunted predators for 3 decades. He told me that was not help and that was a siege. He said they isolated me, disarmed me and then took me hostage. He said we were going back. Panic exploded in my chest and I begged him not to, but he said we were not going back to talk. He said we were going back to get my things and that I was leaving that house today and I was never walking on the side of a highway again. When we reached the estate my father's truck looked completely out of place among the imported sedans and manicured hedges. The house stood silent like a fortress of beige stone and iron gates. He shut off the engine but neither of us moved. Through the windshield I saw them. Anthony and Susan were on the patio laughing with wine glasses and tablets in their hands like they belonged in a lifestyle magazine. They looked like people who had not just forced a mother and child to walk miles on the shoulder of a highway. My father told me to stay in the truck but I ignored him. I unbuckled Noah from his seat with shaking fingers and pulled him into my arms because I was not staying behind. I walked up the driveway behind my father, matching his stride. Susan spotted us first. Her smile froze in place but did not disappear. She called out brightly and offered my father a glass of wine like nothing was wrong. My father walked up the steps and did not look at the wine. He looked straight at Anthony and asked where my keys were. His voice was the same low rumble he used on suspects that made people stop breathing. Anthony stood and smoothed his shirt and said they were worried about me and that I had been unstable and that they took the keys for my own safety and that everyone knows how new moms get. The casual misogyny disguised as concern made my blood boil. I stepped forward and said I was not unstable and I was leaving. Susan laughed sharply and asked where I thought I was going because I had no job, no car, and barely any brain cells left that were not focused on diapers. She said they were protecting me and keeping the family together because I was incapable of doing it myself. My father stepped between us and stared at Susan with cold, flat eyes. He said they were not protecting me and that they were holding me hostage and told them to give me the keys. Anthony crossed his arms and said it was his car and his house and his rules and that if I wanted to leave I could walk, but I was not taking his son. The air in the yard shifted. The birds stopped singing. My father took one step closer and said if Anthony wanted to talk about rules then they could talk about the law. He said withholding personal property, restricting movement and preventing someone from leaving was unlawful imprisonment. Susan scoffed and called me hysterical and said I needed rest. My father turned to me and told me to go inside and get my documents and the baby's things and that he would handle them. I ran past Anthony dodging his hand and heard Susan shouting about trespassing and calling the police, but my father's voice cut through it and told her to go ahead and call because he would love to explain the situation to his former colleagues. I ran upstairs with my heart pounding so hard it hurt. The house felt cold and foreign, like a crime scene instead of a home. I tore open closets and drawers and shoved clothes into a bag without folding anything. Nose, onesies, my jeans, documents, toiletries, anything I could grab. My breath came in jagged bursts of panic. My father stood in the doorway with his back to me, guarding the hall like a wall between me and the people who dismantled my life. I stopped for a moment holding No's favorite blanket and whispered his name. He did not turn around. His shoulders were rigid. He told me he saw it 6 months ago at Sunday dinner when I did not laugh once and when I looked at Anthony before answering simple questions. He said he saw the light going out in my eyes. I froze because he knew. He said he told himself marriage was hard and that he should not interfere and that he was respecting my boundaries, but really he left me behind enemy lines without a weapon. He apologized and his voice cracked with guilt. I put my hand on his arm and told him he was here now but that he needed to know something. I told him I did not stay because I was weak. I stayed because I was terrified that if I left without a plan they would take Noah. I pulled a hidden folder from under the mattress, which was the one place Susan never checked because she was too busy inspecting dust on baseboards. Inside were photos of Anthony's bank statements that I took when he left his laptop open and screenshots of texts between him and Susan discussing how to manage me. I told my father I was not just surviving. I was gathering ammunition. I told him about the invisible chain of survival where if you yank against it, it chokes you harder, but if you wait and pick the lock quietly, you escape. I told him today was that moment. My father looked at the folder and then at me, and he did not see a victim anymore. He saw his daughter. He told me, "Let's go." When we walked downstairs, Anthony stood at the bottom of the steps with fury and disbelief on his face, and Susan stood behind him with her phone raised. She screamed that I could not take Noah and that it was kidnapping and that she was calling the police. My father descended slowly, forcing Anthony to back up, and said it is not kidnapping for a mother to travel with her child, but preventing someone from leaving is unlawful restraint, and lying to a dispatcher is filing a false report. And did she want him to explain sentencing guidelines? Susan's mouth snapped shut and her thumb trembled over her phone. I walked past them without looking back. I did not look at Anthony. I did not look at the kitchen where I cried over burnt toast. I walked out the front door into sunlight that felt blinding and tasted like oxygen. The drive to my father's house felt like the first real breath I had taken in a year. The silence was not empty. It was safe. Noah babbled in the back seat, pointing at trees and trucks and clouds, completely unaware that his mother had just burned down her life to save his. When we pulled into my father's driveway, I expected relief, but instead my brain went into overdrive and the adrenaline crash left me shaky and nauseous. I said we needed to check everything. My father was already on the phone with his lawyer but nodded. I dumped the bag and papers on the kitchen table and began spreading documents out. I had grabbed files from Anthony's office while my father blocked the stairs. It took 10 minutes to realize the damage. My father asked what I found. I whispered that my car was gone. The SUV he bought me when Noah was born. Anthony sold it 3 weeks earlier to a dealership in the next county. The bill of sale was dated the day after he took my keys. $12,000. My father's face went rigid with controlled rage. He did not just sell it. He used the money to pay off a credit card in Susan's name. I dug deeper and found a loan document from a private lender for $40,000. The borrower listed was me. I said I did not sign this and pointed at the forged signature. My father said it looked like Anthony trying to write like me. The room spun. He had taken out debt in my name and drained the educational trust fund my grandmother left me. I logged into my banking app and got locked out. When I called the automated line, it said my balance was zero. I dropped the phone. They took my car, my money, my credit, and my future. It was not control anymore. It was financial destruction designed to trap me forever. My father reviewed the documents and said this was not a marriage issue. This was felony fraud. When Anthony and Susan showed up shouting and threatening custody, I calmly handed them the envelope with the proof, including forged loan documents, bank records, and transfer receipts. Their confidence collapsed as they read. I told them they stole $56,000 and that this was not a marriage problem. It was a crime. I gave them a choice. Return the money by morning or the file goes to the district attorney. They left panicked, exposed, and powerless. 3 months later, I locked the door of my own apartment. It was small, quiet, and chosen by me. My bank balance was modest, but it was mine. Anthony was facing charges and Susan was being investigated. I was rebuilding my life one piece at a time. I was no longer grateful for a cage disguised as comfort. I was grateful for freedom and for my son and for the father who came when I could not save myself.